Welcome to the Business as Mission podcast, dedicated to those who long to see God glorified in business and the nations reached for Christ. Your host is Mike Bayer, longtime BAM leader and founder of Third Path Initiative, an online education resource for starting and growing BAM businesses around the world.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Business as Mission podcast. I'm Mike Bayer, your host, and I am here with a new old friend of mine, Gea Gort from the Netherlands. She and I had the privilege of being together at the BAM Congress of the Netherlands in Dordrecht, which was just a joy, and got to be with her and her husband Menno and spend a little time in their home. So first of all, Gea, thank you for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Yes, well, it's really fun to be your guest, Mike.
Well, we've been trying to do this for a while, so I'm glad we pulled it off. I got a chance to be a guest on your podcast when I was in your home, so that was fun. So let me give some quick introductory things for folks to just write down. All of this will be in the show notes, so you don't have to take, copious notes yourself. But Gea and Bill Job, many of you know the name Bill Job, and many people know Gea because, well, she's been around a while, and she's very well known in her circles, doing a great work. And she also has partnered with Mach Tunehagen for a great book that's available on Amazon about the modern BAM movement. But today, one of the things we're going to talk about is she and Bill Job have created a podcast called Kingdom Keys for Business, Life, and Work. Make sure I got that right. And we're going to encourage our listeners to subscribe to that. You're going to get some great perspective on what God's doing in the world. And when you hear Gea and Bill together, it's kind of magic. So Gea, just again, we'll talk about that. But as we call this BAM Stories, let's hear your story. I'll tell everybody this before we get started. When I was in the Netherlands for the Congress meeting there, I was picked up from the train station by Gea's husband. Gea and I had never met in person, only online. And so her husband, Menno, picked me up at the train station, and immediately he said, "Do you know my story?" And he proceeded to tell me his story and then Gea's story. And I knew right off the bat, we're going to be great friends. It's just a wonderful time. So Gea, tell us your story, and starting kind of with the ship and then move on into the world of BAM. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, that's been quite a journey. Yes, my husband and I, we both have a shipping background in the Netherlands and Europe. You have these river ships, sailing cargo up and down the Rhine into Germany, France, Luxembourg even. So, then we came to know the Lord, and we are like, hey, we want to be involved. But how do you do that on a ship? And my husband was, at that time, my fiancé was sailing at sea. And so after a period of seeking, people kept saying, well, Youth with Mission bought the ship. And so that was actually the pioneer days of mercy ships. So we went off with our 2 kids at that time and pregnant from the third one. And then we arrived in Greece, and we were part of the pioneering days of mercy ships. So, connecting it with Business as Mission, for me, my discipleship was on the ship, where people were integrating mission and work. 400 people on the ship. We needed engineers, we needed financial people, we needed evangelists, medical people. I was doing communication at the time, and my husband was chief officer and later the chief of the whole technical ship. And so after 9 years, we moved to shore. The ship, when we were around, the ship sailed from the States. We were in a lot of ports in the States, and we always felt treated so well. So we felt the States was our second home. And sailing into Mexico, Caribbean, and also Asia. But here the ship went to Europe, Africa. So we moved off, started mercy ships in Netherlands. And the ship sailed from, and still is sailing from the Europe, or basically staying now in Africa. So coming to the Netherlands, I felt right from the beginning that God had a call not only to support the ships, but that there was something with the city. What does that have to do with man? Well, it's at that time, people were, Christians were kind of hiding in their churches.
Mm.
And I come from a very entrepreneurial family. My dad's parents first had river ships, later yacht marina, then they built yachts. So my entrepreneurial mind was like, having this discipleship with mercy ships, how can we get engaged? And I always say, entrepreneurs, business people, they see opportunities, they can create them. So how can they use these talents in the body of Christ and honor God and serve people? So that's kind of in a long, and when the first time, that's probably when did you hear about Business as Mission? That was when I was offered a scholarship with Bucky Graduate University. That's a very international university, and they have a lot of emphasis on theology of work, on urban mission, very innovative, and they encouraged to, besides your dissertation, write a media piece so that it won't, kind of disappear your knowledge in a drawer somewhere. So here I read this book from other students, and that was this big blue book from what was his name? Well, I forgot the name, but I was really, he studied there, and he wrote a book. So that's when I learned about Business as Mission, and it never left me. I was fascinated. I was like, yes, this is so logic. This is so natural, of course.
That's an interesting. Our mutual friend Bill Job says Business as Mission is really just walking with Jesus in business. And he, in his beautiful way, he simplifies it to that. And he's exactly right. When you see it, it's like, why didn't I see this before? It is, as you say, it's just natural. It's as it should be. I love, as I've listened to you, a few things you said stood out to me. One was, learning about Business as Mission on the ships, because really, when you think about it, a ship is a floating business, right? It's not. I mean, yes, it's an extension of maybe a larger shipping business or some other, transportation company, but it is a business. It's a pretty self-contained unit. And then with you at Mercy Ships, the discipleship component all weaved together is really a beautiful thing. Second thing you said, I love and really agree with this, the idea that entrepreneurialism is needed in the church. It is the seeing of opportunity. It's the creating of opportunity. And many times, not just in Holland, but around the world, and certainly in the U.S., the church gets very comfortable within its building and its little confine and doesn't take risks. That's the other trait of an entrepreneur. They take risks, right? They jump over the canyon. They don't just stand there waiting for somebody else to build a bridge. And so I love the idea, and certainly agree with this, bringing that into the church. And then for you, really beginning to see it as a calling on your life, not just through education, but through experience. And as you say, you are an entrepreneur. I'm curious, Gea, as these things began to come, had you always thought of yourself as an entrepreneur?
Not so much. I mean, I was very young mother. When I was 24, we had 4 kids. I mean, it's like, how do we stop this? And so, I was supporting my husband, and I had a desire to write somewhere. So since the school, the Bucky encouraged authoring books, so actually my dissertation piece was on the city, the theology on the city, but I already had a chapter in there on Business as Mission. And it was just not the time yet. I did research then in the Netherlands and Europe. How could this look like in a Western context? And so a few years down the line, a team came together who helped research. And so the first book, the Dutch book, is on stories, how it could look like in a Western European context. And then later Mats was already part of this whole endeavor, his knowledge on the concept. So then later, after the Dutch one was finished, then I started the international one together with Mats, BAM Global Movement, with 30 stories from around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And well, then by that time, people had heard about this red book, that it was very red. It was like, they started connecting and asking me, hey, who else is involved? And then one day we were sitting on the table with an investor, with a director of a mission organization, with a social entrepreneur, in the Netherlands. And there was such energy in the room. Mm. And so much like, hey, we need to connect. We need to bring this further. So, and of course, here were business people on the table. Well, let's do it. We're going to do it.
Yeah, don't talk about it anymore. Let's do it. Yeah.
So, and then I basically have been what I call the spider in the web, and telling the stories and organizing and connecting, and with this team, which is very broad, also interdenominational. And well, you were there. There's such an energy in this network. And so
it's unique in what I've seen around the world. It was very, very special for me to be there back in November. I loved it. And I commented to you, there is something very special going on in the Netherlands. So quick question. You mentioned a couple of times now the idea of business in the city, the relationship between discipleship and the city, like the community. What do you mean by that?
Actually, I'm asked to speak at the BAM Vancouver conference in March 1st. What I see is that it can be such a blessing for the city. Our cities nowadays are the new mission fields. It used to be mission field, used to be overseas in the jungles, but the cities are the new jungles. So, for example, I interviewed a lady in the Philippines who has a ministry there among kids in the, how you call it there, in Philippines, the very poor areas.
Yeah, the barrio, the ghettos, yeah.
The ghettos there. And she teaches young kids, 6 years old, how they could be entrepreneurs, how they can make something, save money, and sell it for a profit. These kids are excited. And what she says, we Filipinos are known all over the world for our servanthood, but we haven't been encouraged to embrace entrepreneurship. So, and then, this could be such a sustainable way to help people. So that's in that area. Here in the Netherlands, I see people in multicultural neighborhoods where there is, in a Western context in Europe, the churches seem to be so far out in people's minds. It's like they don't connect. There's a real secularization going on. But here in this neighborhood, there people meet and they see people at work in a daily setting and taste God at work. I think it can be so powerful. So in many ways, we work with the national, what they call the Protestant mainline church. They have their empty buildings.
Yeah.
We had on one of our congress, we had an Englishman who has downtown London church, and he has a big lunchroom. They have concert in their church, And what he says, it brings such life to have also commerce added to community. So I think there is so much to gain through this. I think it's an area which is hardly scratched.
Oh, I agree. And why does it seem so odd to churches to include business and entrepreneurialism? I mean, they'll include feeding the hungry. They'll include sports for young people. They'll include all kinds of different activities, but in business, they throw up a wall like, well, that doesn't belong here. And it's such a huge part of life. I know for me, in my own experience, when I left the formal pastorate and went into business back in the 80s, I was able to minister to people that I would have never met in any other capacity. They would have never come to a church. They would have never set foot. And yet they would ask me many times, tell me about this God that you seem to know. And I didn't talk about God at work. I mean, I just lived. And I know you've seen the same thing.
Yes. And, as a business person, but also thinking through what can this business mean, through a product, like this person in this multicultural neighborhood, he has a lunchroom, but also a printing business. Mm-hmm. So the people work there in the lunchroom. I mean, in this multicultural neighborhood, the lunchroom is not where he can thrive his business on, but with the printing he can. And he also has a bike courier business in the Netherlands. It's a biking country, so there are a lot of deliveries of packages through bikes. Yeah. And he has 70, 80 people working and coming through the business. So it spreads an atmosphere, it spreads light in this neighborhood. And so I think God can give us ideas how to be, of influence in our neighborhood.
We'll be right back after a short break. The Business as Mission podcast is in partnership with TriVenture, the BAM Launchpad. TriVenture offers the 3 ingredients every entrepreneur needs to launch and scale a BAM business: courses, coaching, and capital. For more information, visit triventure.com.
Well, and it's no question in virtually every country in the world, the business leaders are the men and women of influence. They are they're the people in the gate, so to speak. They're not the only ones, but they have a voice, and the Lord is raising that up. All right, so I'm curious. The Lord was clearly leading you into the world of business as mission. You connected with it. It made sense to you. You're obviously gifted to do it. So how did that then move into, and I want to ask you really about sort of 3 things, but into the BAM Netherlands, first of all, that's become a very, as you say, a very energetic, very profound organization. And then I want to talk a bit about the podcast that you and Bill do. Obviously, I want to hear the mission of that. And then also the coursework, the online coursework that you're building. I mean, you're such an entrepreneur. You're into so many things at once that I wonder when you rest. but I know that you do, but you're also very high energy. So just what's the genesis of BAM Netherlands and obviously what have you been doing, but what's the vision? What is it that you really want to see happen through that?
Well, the Business as Mission Netherlands, and, the audience is very welcome. In November, we have 2 days Congress, and we always have bilingual translation, so these internationals are very welcome. So what we aim for is the concept of business as mission, that it will be embraced by the broader body of Christ. So our main focus is the entrepreneur, because they are the ones doing it. But I think there is so much gifting out there which is not used. You know the stories of business people feeling, hey, we want to be more, do something more with our faith. So it means we need to become a missionary or a pastor or
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there is so much also in the body of Christ. I know a few pastors who are entrepreneurial, and actually last Saturday someone did open a big lunchroom in Amsterdam. But there is so much more gifting. So that's one thing, that we and seeking where is God at work? What are new ways? You were there last year. One of the things we see is that business people also have a calling to help transform whole sections. We had a speaker who talked about the whole food industry, where he really has a calling. Or we have in our network people, in the whole clothing industry. There was whole sections, and International BAM is busy with that. So that's our desire for the BAM movement, to really, see this gift being embraced by the broader body of Christ. My personal seeking quest or search is, how can we see more of God on the work floor? And 2 years ago, Bill Job was at our Congress, and actually I joke with him. I say, you were my second choice. We had someone else and he couldn't come. And I mean, I had heard, of course, of Bill, but I was like, an American, 30 years China, how far away from our context, That's, you want it. But people loved and were very inspired by how he brings God so tangible on the work floor. So that's basically also our focus, also with the podcast, to seek more. How does God work? How can we see him work? And so I think Bill has such a richness in stories, and I'm kind of more a researcher type, like, okay, is this only, is this kind of American blah, 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 great stories, or what's behind there? What's the mindset? So we're still developing this course. It's already online, but we really want to sharpen it. And so what are kingdom mindsets? What are the mindsets behind seeing God at work? So that's what we are developing, and I think we're a good match.
I think you are. I know Bill really well. I've known him for over 25 years, but I've gotten to know you, and I can see just a beautiful partnership and teamwork between you. And your description of Bill, of showing how deeply interested in your day-to-day business God really is, to the point of leading you to hire, leading you not to hire, and helping you solve business problems and financial challenges, and all the stories that he tells of the things the Lord told him. And now the woman who is the president of his company in China, that whole story, I won't steal it because it's such a great story, but that's Bill. And then you have the same passion, you have the same zeal and the same love for Christ, and a mind of a researcher, as you say. You're a very systematic thinker. You're very detail-oriented. You're very logical. And so bringing those two together, to me, creates a beautiful whole, a beautiful picture of what God is trying to say. So, all right, I'm very curious. I know you're working on a course, or probably several courses. I've got a lot of sort of specific detailed questions as we wrap up. So I'll give them to you. Just number one, where can people learn about the Congress coming up in November? Having been there last year as one of the presenters, meeting the people, it was just truly, and I share this with you and Menno, it was a beautiful experience. So whoever from anywhere in the world can attend this. I mean, it's in English. Most of it's in English. Some of it's in Dutch, but there's translation. It's a really well done Congress. So where can they learn more about that? What's the website for that?
The international one, everybody, well, a lot of the listeners knows it's .com. Yes. And basically it's the same business as mission, but then instead of .com, .nl.
Excellent. So they can find out dates, location, registration. Will it be in Dordrecht?
No, because the location we were at will do renovation, so it will be. But Netherlands, it's such a small country, so in 2 hours drive, you're out of the country.
I was gonna make a plug for the hotel I stayed in last time. Oster in Dordrecht was just absolutely magnificent. You had the founders on the podcast. I think it just came out last week. So again, listeners, check that out. All right, so that's that. You're going to be at BAM Vancouver, March 1st, and they can go to bamvancouver.ca, I imagine. But I'll check it out and put it in the show notes. And then where can they find more about Kingdom Keys for Business, Life, and Work with you and Bill?
You know, when people, it should be in all podcasts, but then the course, we have a website called bammoves.com. So business is mission, moves.com.
Right. Okay. And all of this will be in the show notes. We'll make sure that it's easy for people to access this and be a part of it. So, Gea, first of all, thank you for joining me. I always love talking with you. And now that I've met you and Menno in person, I feel like I have close friends and family right there in the Netherlands. I look forward to being back there to visit with you. Give us some parting words just for the audience. Most of our listeners some are BAM practitioners, some are looking into BAM. God is teasing their hearts out to learn more. The purpose, the reason we call it BAM Stories, is to encourage people to know that if the people on the show can do it, then maybe they can too. You know, we would be the first to say we're not super spiritual. We're not super men or women. We're just normal people who God has put his hand on, and he can put his hand on you too. So what would you say to an audience like that?
I would say, don't despise the days of the small beginnings.
Yes.
It's amazing what God can do if we give our lives and our gifts and talents to him. I'm always inspired by the story of Jesus breaking the bread and feeding the multitudes. I mean, it's not always an easy journey, but it's amazing. You know, I'm this very simple little girl growing up on a river ship, cleaning the barges, and but we were very earnest in saying, God, this is our lives, these are our talents, please multiply it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing what God can do. So embrace these small beginnings, but expect him to multiply.
I love it. Gea, thanks for being with us. Gea Gort from BAM Netherlands and many other organizations as well. All of her affiliations will be in the show notes. And I would encourage you, if it's at all possible, to get to BAM Vancouver March 1st. You can register on site. They're still accepting applications for that. And then if you can make it to the Congress in November in the Netherlands, if your experience is anything like mine, be there. Again, look at the show notes for information on how to register. And what a great conversation, Gea. So good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And it was great seeing you again.
Thanks for listening to the Business as Mission podcast. We invite you to become part of the story by supporting the BAM podcast at patreon.com/BAM Stories. There's a link in the notes with this episode. For more information, go to thirdpathinitiative.com or tryventure.com. Please share this podcast and give us a review wherever you listen.